faith and works. This is coming from Romans 4, verse 6 through 10. And it says in verse 6, even as David also describeth the blessedness of the man unto whom God imputeth righteousness without works, saying, blessed are they whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin. Cometh this blessedness then upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How was it then reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. So once you understand the work of God, and you understand that he was once towards the people of Israel, and that the Gentiles were cast out, a people that were literally forgotten in the eyes of God, we then understand that there's a blessedness that happens once we're able to think of someone other than ourselves. This is not because you're that great of a person. This is not just because you're that blessed. It's just because God moves within a time that you could now be yoked to him or connected to him. We now feel the connection of God when we're able to do something that is good. Because when we're in the world, we're doing things that are bad, doing the things that cannot profit us. Now, if we just base being in God and living in God by works, there's people of the world that are doing works. Some that are donating much money in comparison to what you may give. But it's different when you're giving based off of faith, because faith is giving something that you do not have or providing something in which you don't necessarily have in your possession. You're doing things that are not popular. And I think that's the theme of this message. Because many a times we move because we have money. We move because we have the time. But when God tells us to move, yet we're in a time or in a place where we don't have the time, nor we don't have the resources in order to do what God commands us to do, then we have to move by faith. So faith tends to allow us to move out of our comfort zone to a place where God could use us. So when you look at the blessedness marked in verse 8, blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin. So he has forgiven you. But why has he forgiven you? Because he will not put his spirit on an earthen vessel. So you cannot work the works of faith and be an earthen vessel. An earthen vessel basically means that you're living contrary to the word of God. You know, you think carnally, you think vanity. Just like what I mentioned before, you're not going to be able to give if you don't have the money to give. You're not going to take from your bills in order to give to someone, regardless of whether God is telling you to give it or not. But when you learn to live by the Spirit and tap into the Spirit man, then you can understand that it's not about my might or by my strength, but by the Spirit, saith the Lord. So it's not just to the Jews, it's not just to the Gentiles either, it's to everyone who lives by faith. Sometimes we want to put God in this box and say, well, you know, if we're in this box, we're justified. But even we judge ourselves and we look at, well, are we perfect? Are we living to God's standard every day? No. So wouldn't we be out of that box some days and in that box another? Isn't that just contrary in the way that God works? He says, who I call blessed is blessed, and who I call cursed is cursed. So when we're living to the standard of God, working by faith, of course, because we haven't yet attained perfection, yet we're working within perfection, being that God is perfect and his ways are perfect. So now that we're molding our ways to perfection, then he is cleaning us up. And the cleaning that he does is a continual cleaning. And he's not going to stop cleaning. And once you're going to look back on your past, or maybe you could look to your neighbor, you're going to understand that I used to be that person, but I'm no longer that person. Why? Because God is cleaning you up. So if we were to judge perfection as being able not to do the things that you once did, then you're already perfect. But you don't boast yourself of that, right? Because then you're talking about works. But rather you allow God to justify you by allowing you to continue in faith. So now we're starting to understand that faith is a blessing that not everyone could receive. Because it sounds crazy to go ahead and just walk by stuff that you cannot see. I'd rather walk by things that I can see. You know, you pay your bills or you're able to help someone based off of how much money you have. You're able to help someone based off how much free time you have. But God's ways are not our ways. Neither are his thoughts our thoughts. As he told to Peter, cast your hook into the sea. And the first fish that comes up, take out the money that's for you and for me. He will provide for you. And the thing is, he's not just going to provide for one instant, but he's going to provide for your whole life. Faith and works, they work hand in hand. James describes it as, without faith, there's no works, and without works, there's no faith. A man who says he has works without faith, his religion is void and vain. But when you learn to speak things into existence, walk to places that you have never walked before, and do it rejoicing in God, then you not only will be rewarded through works, but you will be justified by faith.